Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen. Today's topic is one that is very special about young Muslim representation in young adult novels. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. Now, our guest today has focused and incorporated young Muslim representation throughout her work. We have with us today S.K. Ali, an award-winning and New York Times best-selling author. Her books have garnered acclaim from a variety of reviewers, including Kirkus Reviews, Entertainment Weekly, the American Library Association, School Library Sounds, NPR, Booklist, and the New York Times. Her work, the novel Love from A to Z, was the first young adult novel chosen for today's show, Read with Jenna's book list. She's absolutely amazing, one of my favorite authors personally, and she lives in Toronto. Just an amazing woman that I look up to. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Amina, for having me. Really excited to be here on your show. Thanks.
Now, I know that throughout your work, you have incorporated and shown young Muslim women as empowered and fierce. Why do you think that Muslim representation is so important, particularly today?
So stories are essentially a record of our lives, and stories that are published in public are public records. And so it's no surprising revelation that Muslim representation captured in the public record has been negative and harmful. So much so that as a young person, like speaking from my experience, like either we found ourselves with growing up with that kind of representation, either trying to distance ourselves from it, from being Muslim, or internalizing it and the stigma, and then just feel like if we were okay with our identity, then feeling disenfranchised from greater society. So right now there's a reclaiming of our stories and our narratives on the public record, and this reclaiming is being done by like those of us like myself who grew up with misrepresentation, and then young people who are not allowing others to speak for them. So there's like this joining of forces of people who grew up feeling that for so long, like that our stories were not on the record, and then young people who are now like who, because of changes in society, are empowered to not let anyone speak for them. So the joining of the forces of all of us is actually, there's a transformative moment happening right now. And so Muslims, it's really important that Muslims be part of it, and we take like the words, we taking back our narratives is used often, but it's actually what's happening right now.
Yeah, and you talked about some of the harmful impacts that wrong Muslim representation has, and both of us love Muslim representation. But why do you think that's so lacking in today's society?
So I essentially like boil it down to gatekeeping. So if you've been allowed to shape the narrative of of just different aspects of society for so long, you've had the power to do so, it's really hard to give it up. So I think, I know growing up as a person who had creative inclinations all throughout my life, and who, constantly was trying to get letters into the editor, because in the past you actually had to write a letter and send it to get your voice heard on topics. As someone who was always trying to do that, there was always like this, actually, it felt like a literal door shut in your face, like the door wasn't opened, and you had to constantly like have some kind of connection to somebody who would say, all right, I'll let you in, or something. And so it was just a lot of gatekeeping, and the people who are the ones who keep those that who are allowed to keep the different narratives going, they don't want the status quo to change, because it's beneficial. Anybody in power, it's beneficial to keep that power. But I would say that now, within the last few years, and I really think attributed to the social media, to people using social media in ways that's reclaiming our stories.
Right.
Um, it's the gatekeeping is falling away, and now we're finding new ways to get, like, your show itself is an excellent example of that. We're finding ways to actually get our voices out there. So yeah, that's what I essentially attributed to, that there was the gatekeeping happening, and now alhamdulillah, it's falling away more.
I think it's great to hear that finally we're reclaiming that pen into our own hands. I think it's, it's far too long that we haven't had that pen in our hand. But have you had personally any challenges when depicting Muslim characters? And do you feel like it's more difficult to depict Muslim characters than perhaps other characters?
No, actually, I find it the opposite. I find it easier to write Muslim characters because obviously it's my closer to my experience. It's characters I was surrounded with and am surrounded with now. So it's easier. And actually it's also like a lot of car, writers from marginalized backgrounds talk about this. It's also easy for us to write the dominant majority as well, because we've been schooled in that. Like
Right.
we've been we've been exposed to that. It's all around our uh, us, because sometimes there's the question of, like, people will say, well, how can marginalized creators be the ones who write their own narratives and write about others? Well, we can, because you know we're swimming in it. So it's like, but on the whole, like, while I do, all my books do have like an ensemble characters of various backgrounds, on the whole, I focus on Muslim characters because of the void in Muslim characters, stories with Muslim characters, and because I find it the easiest to write as well.
It sounds like the best of both worlds, that you're able to write about the majority group, but also, this Muslim representation that you're saying is obviously lacking. You're able to fill that void in a way through your writing. But Sajida, if there was something that you could tell your old, younger writing self, you're now a renowned author, what would you tell your younger writing self?
So I would say start exploring yourself earlier. That's what I would tell my younger writing self. I mean, I read Little Women, I read Anne of Green Gables when I was young, and like a lot of others. And Joe and Anne in those stories, they're like writers too, and they learn early on that to write what you know, and it's a very oft repeated statement that writers are given. But I couldn't write what I know, even though I read those books and I'm like, this is what they learned. I couldn't write what I knew, because I just felt like I've never seen it. So when I started writing as a tween, uh, and until I got to university, I was always writing white characters and characters that are different from myself, because that's what I always saw. Like, I was writing a lot of adult kind of characters because, again, I was reading those books. But it was only when I got to university and got exposed to literature that was by non-white writers, like South Asian writers, African writers, South American writers, that I felt kind of like this aha, oh, we're allowed to share our stories. It was really sad that it was only when I read that I really felt that permission. So that's what the advice I would give myself as a younger writer. Um, you know, write, start writing what you know earlier. Yeah.
That's so interesting that you talk about permission because, even previously you spoke about gatekeeping and how that is a trend. And maybe that is why you felt that way, right? You never
Yeah.
saw that type of representation growing up. So when you
Yeah.
finally did, it was like probably that aha moment, like, oh, wow, I can do
Yeah.
this too.
Exactly.
But I want to ask, how has your experience after being published look like? And what does success as a writer to you mean?
So after you're published, so before you're published and you're writing, you're essentially kind of writing for yourself. You're trying to, figure out what it is that, you're saying, and you're just really internally focused. And even, because I had a writing group of friends, and even though we, connect and share with each other, it was still like you're very much in your own world. Once you're published and you continue to get published, there's a lot more people involved, including readers which I actually like. My readers are really important to me. They are the most important part of the whole process. But there is like a sense of like there's more people involved. Everybody on the publisher side has a part in your book, um, and so it becomes more of like, you know, you're writing with more things in mind than your own what you want to say, which I actually like because
Okay.
yeah, because I actually like, I don't know, every writer can like has a different take on this, but I actually like to know what I got. Like, like when in my first book, Saints and Misfits, a lot of
Mm.
readers were like, oh, they wanted a happier ending, and because they didn't see that feeling of like, um, a sense of closure for the main character.
Okay.
And when I read that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that for my next book because it's important to make your readers happy, like for me as
Mm.
a writer. So I did that, and I try to do that in Love from A to Z. So yeah, so that's the changes, because before getting published, I would never really, obviously considered those things. And literary success to me would just mean that like readers want to, I'm connecting with readers. Like that's the biggest definition of success for me as a writer in terms of like this world, the dunya, is that my readers are connecting, and that I love to know that readers come from a different variety of backgrounds, but my Muslim readers are very important to me because they're like, I heard an author describe it like a Mexican American author describe his readership as like if he's telling a story to a campfire gathering, and then like the first group of like the people sitting at the campfire are like the Latinx community, and then behind is like the other people listening.
Right.
So I love that imagery because for me, my first circle is my Muslim readers, my young Muslim readers. And then, I love that other people connect with my books too. And I'm really happy to see that, it's people have connected who are not of Muslim background. But my Muslim readers are so important to me because I remember growing up as a really big reader, not feeling seen. So
Mm.
when my Muslim readers, young Muslim readers, I get emails every week, several emails every week, or messages saying how they see themselves. So that to me is like a definition of success, that that my work is connecting with them.
And I can definitely, as a young Muslim, woman, I can definitely say that when I read your book, I was like, finally, I was happy that finally I read a book that was a young adult book, and it depicted Muslim women as how I see them, right? As empowered and educated, and they know what they want. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And your book, Love from A to Z, and I'm so excited to read your newest book as well. And we'll continue speaking, Sajida, right after our short break. You're all watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Next Gen. I'm here with award-winning author S.K. Ellie. Thank you so much, S.K. Ellie, for being with us here today. And I want to ask you, where do you get your inspiration for your characters from?
So my inspiration just comes from like everyday life. And I describe it as like ahas that we get.
Mhm.
I think that, as humans, we get different ahas throughout our lives. And I've always been interested in it, and I'm a journaler. So not a consistent journaler, but like when something happens that I just want to remember, I will write it down. And so these can be very simple ahas to just bigger life, kind of, just understandings of life that you suddenly get because something happens to you. So those were like, that's where my kind of inspiration and ideas come from. So with my so I'm going to talk about a book that I'm actually currently working on that is that's a little departure from my what I've written previously, and because in that it's not a contemporary novel, and the inspiration from that is based on just how like so much of our life as like in a global on the global stage. And I'm talking about, someone who's been interested in like, how is it that we justify oppression of others? And, but, not accepted in some cases and then accepted in other cases. And the value of human life and how, and I talked about this a little bit in Love from A to Z with like how, the victims of drone warfare are not given any kind of much of a focus. And so, just on a whole, like I've always been somebody who's been interested in as like what makes the reality of like some people's lives worth more than others. And
Mhm.
just even as a teen, I remember, just noticing that like because at that time we didn't have online news and stuff. We had newspapers, and at that time you would see like a victim of something happening, if it happened in anywhere in Europe or in North America, they'd be named. Their name would be there under the picture. And if it was a victim anywhere else in the world, they were unnamed. So that little thing that just like, you know, um, that I noted when I was young, actually drove me to studying media and mass communications, and that was one of the things. And so now that I have this place to write from, I like whatever topics I'm interested in, I explore through my books. Because before I used to go on protest marches, organize like um, letters to the government and policymakers. And I mean, those are valid things. But now, as an author, what I can do is take those issues that I'm concerned about and that I've always been concerned about, um, and then shape them into a book. So that's my inspiration and my ideas. Like, I guess that's where it comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that you said before you would organize, but now this is your way. Writing is your way to show to people what your stance perhaps on things are. I think that is a very, notable shift. And like you said, obviously both are important. But I
Mm.
think as a community as a whole, we have to really use our talents to
Yes.
talk about the issues that we face. And I see you doing that.
Mhm.
But throughout your journey, I know this might be a bit difficult to answer, but what is one important lesson that you have learned that perhaps other people can kind of take away, other young, aspiring writers that look up to you?
So the lesson that I'm going to share, I'm going to try to see how I can like formulate it in a way that could, be of benefit to young writers. But for myself as an author, it's the biggest lesson that I've learned. No, sorry, I can't say it's the biggest because I don't know what's the biggest, but like it's like one of the
Right.
lessons that I've learned is that you're one small part of the whole process, of like in this case getting a book out. That there's a whole team and a group of people, from readers to publishing people to all of, there's so many parts of the whole machine, and everybody that's part of that machine, I'm using a very like cold term, machine, but what I mean is like everybody is part of getting something that you're working on out, needs to be cherished and like lauded and treated with kindness. And because there's always like a face of something, and authors are often, and I didn't like that aspect of being an author, because I'm mainly a behind the scenes kind of like, I don't like to be like, I don't like to even be on TV like this, but
Mhm.
like so that bothered me, that that there's like this one face of something, and the reality is there's so many parts to it and so many people to it that actually make it happen. So I guess for a young writer, I would say that just recognize that like writing is a very solitary, independent kind of activity that you're doing, like your mind and the screen or the paper that you're working on. But to get our stories out there is more than just yourself. And so, work with people and cherish them as being part of getting your stories out there. Yeah.
I think that really explains why you were an organizer before, just a totally behind the scenes type of person. But now as a writer, you are seeing yourself having perhaps a larger platform, seeing your face, you're the face of these books. And obviously you're saying that there's a bigger team behind that. But for all of the books that you have published that are still in the process, do you want them to each be a standalone or kind of have a shared theme and come together? How are you looking at that?
So I don't really like consider that aspect when I'm writing, like where it fits in with the rest of my books. But though some people might think, oh, like The Proudest Blue, which I'm just gonna hold up, like it's a picture book that I wrote with Ibtihaj Muhammad, and so blue is very important in here, because the blue is a color that the characters love. And then in my young adult book, Love from A to Z, blue is very important.
Right.
There's like this connection that just kind of happened, even though like this book I wrote in 2016, and then this book I wrote in 2018, and I didn't really even remember that like blue was such a pivotal thing in The Proudest Blue. But and now there's something like that happening again. So maybe it's my unconscious, like subconscious
Right.
mind putting things together. So there's no like real connections that I'm like thinking about, though. I will say that my young adult novels seem to be set in the same universe as each other. Like, the character from Saints and Misfits appears in Love from A to Z, and then the sequel to Saints and Misfits, Adam and Zainab, who I just love. I just love
Yeah.
this cover. Who they show up in that novel. So
Oh, that is so
yeah.
cool. What are you most excited? I think that's what I am most excited about now for Misfits in Love. But what are you most excited about?
Um. So like, I think I'm just most excited about like just the coming together of like so many Muslim characters, and
Right.
with non-Muslim characters who have been in the characters' lives, and in a wedding, it's set at a wedding, so it's set at a like a 4-day kind of like the activities around a big wedding. And so I actually like, just because weddings are a place for people to come together, I'm most excited about the fact that it's a symbolic getting together of like just a bigger community, and the community is not only Muslims but also non-Muslims. And I find like I think maybe I put hope into the book like that I think that we can come together, inshallah, just recognizing each other as we are. And so I think that's the most exciting thing. I'm also excited about like just sharing henna party stuff, and like that there's a henna party. I'm actually excited because it's a really small thing to be excited about, but maybe not for the people who showed up in the book. Actually, when I was in Chicago, and your producer Zainab was, I met her when I was in Chicago for my book tour for Love from A to Z. I actually went to a school that had like a very excited group of Muslim girls, who asked, who got me to come to their school, and they got like 200 kids
Wow.
excited, like they actually kind of hand sold the book to like their friends who are non-Muslim and everything, and they just got everybody excited about it. And I met them afterwards, like the librarian, had a little party with them, and I just like loved, hearing about their experiences. And they ran the MSA in their school and stuff, and I decided to put them in the book. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
they know that their names are in the book as guests of at the wedding.
Oh,
So
wow. That is so amazing. Oh my God.
I guess I'm really excited about that, because I don't know, I did it because I it's part of my whole thing about like I want young Muslim readers and young Muslims to see themselves in the book. So this is a literal,
Literally, right.
literally, you're put in
Wow.
my book. Yeah.
And we're all excited for your newest book. Thank you so much, SK
Thank
Ellie,
you.
for being with us today. Make sure to check out her work. She's absolutely phenomenal. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. And until next week, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.
Walaikum assalam.